Welcome, Pontiac High School students, to today's lesson on the roles of the president. The President of the United States is the head of the executive branch of government, created in Article 2 of the Constitution. The office carries with it many powers and many responsibilities. However, the framers of the Constitution put some very specific limits on those powers. These are the people that had just lived their lives under the authority, tyranny, say what you want, of King George III of England, of Great Britain, and they did not want the rise of another king. So they made sure that this person would be powerful enough without being too powerful. How did they limit their power? Well, presidents may enforce laws, but only Congress can write laws. So the President of the United States cannot do anything that the Congress hasn't said that they can do. Congress must also approve certain decisions of the president. And if they believe the president of the United States is heading in the wrong direction or done actions which are un-American or contrary to the interests of our nation, they have the power to impeach the president for that sort of wrongdoing. They can kick him out of office. The Supreme Court can also declare the president's actions to be unconstitutional. So we have both other branches of government working pretty hard to make sure that the president's powers are somewhat limited. So, who gets to be the President of the United States? There are a few, and I do mean few, limitations to this. The President of the United States must be at least 35 years old. This is something of a joke. Nobody who's even close to 35 has ever seriously been considered to be the President of the United States. Our youngest of the young presidents have been in their early to mid 40s. So the idea that we would elect somebody who's 35, it's just, he doesn't have enough experience. Number two, they have to be a natural born citizen of the United States. That is, they have to have been born a citizen. You can be born a citizen in a few ways. You're a citizen if your parents are citizens. You are a citizen if you are born on U.S. territory. So if there's land that is controlled by the United States, it doesn't matter if your parents are citizens. If you're born here, you're a citizen. If your parents are visiting Canada and you were born on that visit, it doesn't mean that you're not a citizen. Your parents are citizens, you're all good. Additionally, you have to have lived in the country for at least 14 years. So if you decide that you want to go spend some time in Europe and you go live in Europe for 10 years and then you come back, well, you got to wait another 14 before you can be the President of the United States. President's salary. The President of the United States currently makes a salary of about $400,000 per year. So the president makes a good salary, but when you consider the background and the accomplishments of most of the people who rise to this office, this is not actually that much money, especially when you consider that most people who are leaders of successful large businesses in this country, they're making millions and millions and millions. President Donald Trump certainly made substantially more than $400,000 per year prior to being elected president of the United States. So that's a pretty huge pay cut for somebody like him. And it's been a large pay cut for others as well. Additionally, presidents in the United States, they serve 4-year terms, but they are not allowed to serve more than 2 of them. We did have one president once, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was elected to 4, although he died very early in that 4th. But after him, we decided to set a limit at 2. So he will be the only one that ever served more than 2, unless our Constitution is changed. All right, the roles of our president. The president has a lot of roles, and we're going to run through those in this lesson. The president of the U.S. must carry out the laws of the nation and be a representative of the nation. But the framers of our Constitution never really outlined how he should do this. And so it was left to George Washington, our first president of the United States, to kind of set the example. And in most cases, most presidents have followed pretty closely to the example set by George Washington. He did a pretty good job as first president, so people wanted to follow his lead. Chief executive is one of those roles. It's the most basic of the president. It basically said he's the head of the executive branch of government. That means he's the boss of everybody that works for the executive branch. which means about 4,000 officials. Okay, so he is the boss of about 4,000 officials. Really, he's not going to deal with those 4,000 on a regular basis. He's got 20 to 25 that he deals with on a very regular basis, and the rest are the employees of those 20 to 25. And these officials exist to help the president carry out the laws of Congress. Number 2, the president is the commander-in-chief. It's a nice title. That basically means he's the head of the U.S. military. He's not himself a member of the U.S. military. He's just the boss of the U.S. military. He sets the broad military objectives, decides where our military goes. But it's our nation's generals who actually lead troops in battle. No sitting president has ever really led troops in a war. George Washington would be probably the best example of a president who kind of did do a little bit of that, but you won't see President Trump leading any fights in any military theaters. It's just not going to happen. It hasn't happened in our military history since Washington's days. All right, chief diplomat. The president is in charge of Americans' foreign policy. This is a big job, but it is the president's job. The Senate really doesn't have any final say on any of this stuff. They advise, but they don't have final say. This is the president's job. He is the chief diplomat. But he does have people who help him with this. These people are called ambassadors, and they're going to manage our relationships with individual nations. We have, for example, an ambassador to Canada, where if there's an issue, a dispute between the United States and Canada, these ambassadors are going to be the ones that really handle the issue. Formal treaties with other nations, however, we wanted to enter into a treaty with them, has to be ratified by the Senate. So the Senate does have some sort of checks on those powers. The president just can't decide, you know what, I really like Vladimir Putin. I think that he's a stand-up guy and that Russia should be our new best friend. So I'm going to sign all sorts of treaties with Russia. The Senate gets to say whether or not the president can do that. Legislative leader, a leader in laws. Wait a minute, the president can't introduce bills. He can't write laws. Well, he can write laws. He just can't officially introduce them into Congress, and that's an important distinction. The chief legislator can write bills, but he has to have a friend in the Senate or the House of Representatives who's willing to introduce that bill for him. But when you're the president of the United States of America, it's pretty easy to have a friend in the Senate or the House of Representatives who will do that for you. I'm not aware of any instance in any situation in American history where a president was not able to find a member of the House who would introduce his bill. Additionally, the simple threat of a veto helps to guide how Congress shapes their bills. The president can simply say, hey, I hear that the Agriculture Committee is discussing doing land redistribution or some other crazy stuff in Vermont. No, if you try to pass that, I'm going to veto it. So you might want to take that out of your bill right now. And Congress will probably do that if they want to see anything get passed into law at all. Judicial power, our chief jurist. The president has some judicial power, the most important of which is he gets to appoint federal judges. So if there's an opening in any of the 100+ federal courts that Congress has created, or the Supreme Court, the president gets to fill that seat, gets to pick whomever he wants, with one important caveat. The Senate has to confirm or ratify those decisions. Anytime the president says, I want this person to be a judge, the Senate gets a final say, a final yes or no vote on that person. Most importantly and most publicly, this comes up with Supreme Court justices. And it was the Senate's refusal to ratify any choice by President Obama is a reason why we spent a year in 2016 without one of the seats in the Supreme Court being filled. Another power the president has, they can pardon any criminal accused of any federal crime. So if you're accused of a federal crime, the president can simply say, I forgive you, and that person gets out of prison. Or they can do something called commutation and say, you got 20 years for that crime. That's not right. We're going to say that should only be a 5-year sentence. The president has that power as well. Yeah, it's good to be the president. All right. Other roles not created in the Constitution but created over time include these traditional roles. They're less formal. They're important for us to know, though. One is the chief of party. The president is the most well-known and visible member of their political party and is thus considered the leader of the political party. So going forward, President Trump will be considered the leader of the Republican Party. Many Republicans won't be crazy about that idea, but that's who their leader is. The chief of party is expected to help raise money for congressional elections and to outline the goals of the party to the American people. Chief of state. This is kind of the fun one. The president is supposed to represent the morals and values of America by serving in ceremonial duties. America loves baseball, so our chief of state might go out and throw out the opening pitch. Just recently, President Obama had the Cleveland Cavaliers in to celebrate their NBA championship. This is all kind of chief of state stuff. They give out awards, attend sporting events, but they also do other things. If there's a natural disaster, the president will frequently show up and show his support for those people. It's basically any of the non-governmental activities that you might get involved in. And those are the multi-roles of our president. This one was a little bit of a long one, but thank you for tuning in, and farewell.